Has this ever happened to you? You love playing mono red and you're looking to build a new commander deck, but you already have a storm deck, and a red aggro deck doesn't sound fun since it just feels like a downgrade from Boros aggro. And you're a hipster who doesn't like to play things that are already popular. Well, not that unpopular, we need to be at least some level of commander viable here. So you stumble upon Feldon of the Third Path and try building him. But your first thought when seeing him was that it'd be funny to try turboing out a sloppy spaghetti monster as soon as you can, but now your opponents got mad at you because you ruined Doug's entire game plan for the one game he gets to play tonight with your dumb Pathrazor bit, so your other opponents start swinging at you and blowing up all your permanents because they didn't want you to hit them with an Eldrazi, so now you're left with no board and no life totals because you thought you could turbo out the noodle team? Has this ever happened to you? Well, it happened to me, and let me talk about how I managed to solve these problems and build what I call the mono-red mid-range deck in Commander. Let's start off with a quick introduction to Feldon. Feldon of the Third Path was one of the alternate commanders for Magic's 4th round of precons back in 2014 for this new commander format they were trying to get off the ground. It's crazy how that was only 11 years ago. My, how Magic has changed since then. His game plan's pretty simple. Have Feldon in play, then spend 3 mana to make a temporary copy of a creature in your graveyard, then hit someone with it before it gets sacrificed at the end of the turn. So if I copy Solemn Simulacrum here, I get to fetch a land into play and draw a card, all for 3 mana. Now that's what I call value. The only downside with this game plan is that it's very easy to get tempted to do absolutely horrendous things by summoning awful creatures like a Pathrazor or Wulamog or some other Eldrazi to start swinging around at your opponents pretty early in the game. And if you do this way too early, you're just left a sitting duck, since you have fully tapped out just to try and knock one player down a peg, but your other 2 opponents are going to kick your butt, because they want to prevent these noodly monstrosities from coming after them next. Because of this, I found the deck was kind of boring when I played it, because it was very feast or famine, so I ended up tearing it apart. But I later wanted to find a way to build kind of a quote-unquote normal commander deck in red, that didn't just try to end the game quickly like my storm deck would, but instead play the game of commander, where you spend time ramping and drawing cards to get some big threats into play, and I realized Feldon was the perfect commander for this, with some minor tweaks. So let's walk through how to make Feldon into a mono-red mid-range deck that's able to be just as reactive as any other color combo at the table. The new game plan is simple. Keep doing the copy and reanimation thing, but find a way to keep something on the board so we're not just left wide open during our opponent's turns. The first thing I had to do was refocus the creatures away from just being giant scary threats, to creatures that I could also provide some sort of value over time. The first group of creatures to focus on are ones that generate card advantage. Solemn Simulacrum is great, but there are other more potent options that have been printed since Feldon came out that can generate much more advantage for us throughout the game. Some of the best examples of this type of creature are Trumpeting Carnosaur and Anti-Causal Vestige. The Carnosaur's Enter trigger will have you reveal cards off the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card with mana value 5 or less, then you can cast it or put it into your hand. This means you're either netting a free card or drawing a card each time you copy this dinosaur. Add in the fact that it's a big 7/6 trampler that can swing immediately, and it can discard itself to act as removal, and it's no wonder why this is one of the best cards in the deck. The Anti-Causal Vestige works kind of in reverse. It's a big 7/5 creature, but when it leaves, you get to draw a card, and you can put something into play tapped for free, as long as its mana value is less than or equal to the number of lands you have. This also includes land cards, so at worst, you're drawing a card and you can ramp, and at best, you get to cheat in some other valuable permanent into play. The original Tale is also a great example of this, because the token copy has haste, so you can attack with him immediately and potentially cast 4 free spells on the same turn. Ruin Grinder, Combustible Gearhulk, and Neheb, Dreadhorde Champion all provide great ways of keeping your hand and graveyard full, premium cards to reanimate, and Neheb can even provide mana to help cast some of the cards that you have in hand. The next group of creatures to consider are ones that act like removal pieces. There's some very easy ones, like Fury or Drakozeth, that just deal damage to get things out of the way, but the real fun is using Feldon's ability on other people's turns to interrupt their game plan. Creatures like Dualcaster Mage and Direfleet Daredevil allow you to play on the stack and either copy counterspells or even just other useful innocence and sorceries your opponents cast. Oh, is that a Rise of the Dark Realms you're casting? Well, it's mine now. Good luck reanimating those empty graveyards, idiot. Stark of Wrath provides an interesting way to remove bigger creatures your lightning bolts can't usually get, and that's because the token has to get sacrificed at the end of the turn, meaning the Stark's downside of needing to be donated doesn't exist because the token's gone before your opponent gets a chance to use it. And creatures like Zealous Conscripts provide a very fun way to mess with people by yoinking their things right out from underneath them as they're about to do something, at the worst possible time. Imagine this scenario where your opponent controls a Laboratory Maniac and they have a blue Sun Zenith with X equals 1,000,000 pointed at themselves. If you use Feldon to reanimate the Zealous Conscripts in your graveyard to take the Laboratory Maniac out from underneath them, they'll end up losing the game instead of winning, so they can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And now for the last category of creature. Surprise! It's still just big dumb guys. We just need to be a little bit more mindful of which ones we're putting in here, because we want to make sure that we have the ability to still defend ourselves after we make a copy of it. Creatures like Wormcoil Engine and Triplicate Titan are classics. They hit hard, and they make a bunch of blockers when they die. Markov Enforcer can remove a problematic creature in play, and if it happens to deal damage to something and it dies in the same turn, you make a blood token, which can allow you to cycle cards out of your hand for 1 mana. The cool part about this ability is that it triggers whenever you have any vampire under your control, so cloning it can cause this thing to go crazy if somebody has a bunch of small creatures in play. Because the token copies you make are artifacts, you can offer them to the Hellkite for a reduced cost, since the copies retain the original card's mana value. The Hellkite provides good defense because it has double strike, but it also provides an incentive for your opponents not to swing at you because they'll get double strike if they go to your opponents instead. And then you got other classic big red guys like Inferno Titan and Drakuseth again, who can remove smaller creatures when they attack or just deal more damage to your opponent's faces directly. Now that we've covered the main categories, let's talk about the supporting structure for the deck. This breaks down into 2 main categories, the first one being how do we convert the copies that Feldon makes into actual creatures that stick around. And the easiest way to do this is to use Sundial the Infinite to end your turn with the sacrifice trigger on the stack so you get to keep the tokens that you made that turn. The only problem is that it can still leave you defenseless if all those tokens are tapped. So some of the cooler tricks are to use cards like Industrial Advancement and Air Gas to provide ways to more permanently keep something on the board. Industrial Advancement lets you sacrifice the tokens that you make to look at the top X, where X is the mana value of the token that you sacrificed, and then put a creature from among those into play. And Air Gas is kind of similar, where you can be cast by sacrificing the token to reduce its emerge cost, and then later turns you can use tokens that you make to sacrifice them to help pay the emerge costs of other big creatures that you have in your hand. And then effects like Fireflux Squad let you exile an attacking token that you don't really care about, and reveal cards off the top of your library until you find a new creature to put that one into play. But it won't have to get sacrificed at the end of the turn. Unfortunately, this ability puts it in play tapped and attacking, so it won't really be able to block on the same turn unless you can find a way to untap it somehow. And finally, you can use cards like Chaos Warp and Zoya's Justice to gamble on what's on top of the library to see if you can find something cool in a pinch. Summoner's Egg and Clone Shell are creatures that can also help in this process, as Feldon makes copies of them. Both of these cards exile a card when they enter, and that card gets flipped over when the creature dies. If the card happens to be a creature, it goes into play for free. So you can use one of these to block something an opponent swings at you and then get a very big thing out for free and hit them with it on the crackback. Or you could exile a mountain with it and just play mind games. What fun! The other way to maximize the amount of value you have is to just make more tokens, and so that's the other plan we have here. Copy the copies. Cards like Determinate Iteration and Redoubled Stormsinger will make us an extra copy of something we made this turn. And cards like Jaxus the Troublemaker and Reflections of Kiki-Jiki will let us make copies of something for a small cost to activate their abilities. Calamity Galloping Inferno is hilarious because first you make a token copy of something, then use it to saddle Calamity, and then when Calamity attacks that turn, you get 2 more copies of the thing that saddled it. The first time I used this card, I made a total of like 3 copies of Solemn Simulacrum, and it was hilarious. Girid's Belligerence lets you make permanent copies of creature tokens you control, as long as you can burn enough small creatures to get the delayed trigger to happen. But with cards like Drakuseth or Inferno Titan, that really shouldn't be that hard to pull off in a reliable manner. And on the topic of making copies, if you include Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker in the deck, it goes infinite with creatures like Zealous Conscripts or Coercive Recruiter. And personally, I didn't want this in my version of the deck since I found it made games just end randomly when I drew into it, and the nature of the Reanimator deck can make it kind of hard to disrupt this combo without just exiling your graveyard over and over again, or getting focus out of the game. I tried removing Zealous and Recruiter, but I found I liked the interactivity they provided more than the extra copy effect that Kiki-Jiki provided, so I ended up swapping Kiki-Jiki out for another copy maker, and I have not had any issues since I've done this. Now with all the base stuff of the deck out of the way, let's talk about the Manabase. The Manabase is really simple. It's just 39 mountains. Nah, I'm just joking. We should be trying to use as many cool utility lands as we possibly can, since we're in a monocolored deck. So we actually run a spread of 27 mountains and 12 utility lands. The modal double-face lands are very nice, since they're not dead draws on later turns. Spine Rocknull gives us a free card if someone takes 7 damage, which either we're going to end up doing, or somebody else will cause randomly to happen. Arena of Glory can give Feldon or something else that we cast haste, as long as it's in the later part of the game. Valakut can start slinging lightning bolts every time you have mountains enter, which pairs nicely with Myriad Landscape and Sundering Explosion. Roadside Reliquary, Bonder's Enclave, and War Room after card draw in a pinch. And Scavenger Grounds can give you an answer to other graveyard-based decks. And that's it. Overall, the deck is a blast to play, and I hope you can have as much fun as I have piloting your own version of this deck. My deck list is in the description, but feel free to comment on this video with suggestions for how you'd improve upon it. And don't forget to subscribe to see what deck I talk about next. Thanks for making it to the end of the video, and I hope you have a great day.